Well, hello. Welcome to part 15 of my Project 2025 reading, Mandate for Leadership, The Conservative Promise. We are on page 203 of this 920-page PDF document. Let's just get this out of the way. I'm having sparkling water with Irish whiskey. And it's delicious. And you can't have any because this is a podcast and you can't take things from somebody in a podcast. Not that I know of anyway. All right, that's enough metaphorical nonsense. Let's get to it. Chapter 6, Department of State, written by Chiron, K-I-R-O-N-K, Skinner. Oh, and if you hear any weird water noises in the background, I have a partner playing in the sink about 20-30 feet away. I'm pretty sure you won't hear it, but if you do, that's why. The U.S. Department of State's mission is to bilaterally, multilaterally, and regionally implement the President's foreign policy priorities, to serve U.S. citizens abroad, and to advance the economic, foreign policy, and national security interests of the United States. Since the U.S. founding, the Department of State has been the American government's designated tool of engagement with foreign governments and peoples throughout the world. They use the word peoples. Country names, borders, leaders, technology, and people have changed in more than the 2 centuries since the founding, but the basics of diplomacy remain the same. Although the department has also evolved throughout the years, at least in the modern era, there is one significant problem that the next president must address to be successful. There are scores of fine diplomats who serve the president's agenda, often helping to shape and interpret that agenda. At the same time, however, in all administrations, there is a tug of war between presidents and bureaucracies, and that resistance is much starker under conservative presidents, due largely to the fact that large swaths of the State Department's workforce are left-wing and predisposed to disagree with a conservative president's policy, agenda, and vision. It should not and cannot be this way. The American people need and deserve a diplomatic machine fully focused on the national interest as defined through the election of a president who sets the domestic and international agenda for the nation. And that's why all the Trump trolls you encounter say, he is a duly elected president, he has a mandate. Because they believe that only the president should set the agenda for the nation. Just a little insight into their, shall we say, narrow-mindedness. The next administration must take swift and decisive steps to reforge the department into a lean and functional diplomatic machine that serves the president and thereby the American people. Below is the basic but essential roadmap for achieving these repairs. History and context. Founded in 1789, the Department of State was one of the first cabinet-level agencies in the new American government. The first Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, oversaw a small staff, diplomatic posts in London and Paris, and 10 consular posts. Today, the Department of State has almost 80,000 total employees, including 13,517 Foreign Service employees and 11,683 Civil Service employees in 275 embassies, consulates, and other posts around the world. In theory, the State Department is the principal agency responsible for carrying out the President's foreign policy and representing the United States and other nations and international organizations. To the extent consistent with presidential policy and federal law, the department also supports U.S. citizens and businesses in other nations and vets foreign nationals seeking temporary or permanent entrance to the United States. The State Department also provides humanitarian, security, and other assistance to non-U.S. populations in need, and otherwise advances and supports U.S. national interests abroad. Properly led, the State Department can be instrumental for communicating and implementing a foreign policy vision that best serves American citizens. As the U.S. Commission on National Security/21st Century, the Hart-Rudman Commission, observed more than 20 years ago, the State Department is a crippled institution suffering from an ineffective organizational structure in which regional and functional policies do not serve integrated goals, and in which sound management, accountability, and leadership are lacking. Unfortunately, this critique remains accurate. The State Department's failures are not due to a lack of resources. As one expert has observed, the department has significantly more at its disposal than was the case at the end of the Cold War in the mid-1990s and at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. A major source, if not the major source, of the State Department's ineffectiveness lies in its institutional belief that it is an independent institution that knows what is best for the United States, sets its own foreign policy, and does not need direction from an elected president. The next president can make the State Department more effective by providing a clear foreign policy vision, selecting political officials and career diplomats that will enthusiastically turn that vision into a policy agenda, and firmly supporting the State Department as it makes the necessary institutional adjustments. Political leadership and bureaucratic leadership and support. Focusing the State Department on the needs and goals of the next president will require the president's hand-picked political leadership, as well as foreign service and civil service personnel who share the president's vision and policy agendas to run the department. This can be done by taking these steps at the outset of the next administration. Exert leverage during the confirmation process. Notwithstanding the challenges and slowness of the modern U.S. Senate confirmation process, the next president can exert leverage on the Senate if he or she is willing to place State Department appointees directly into these roles, pending confirmation. Doing so would both ensure that the department has immediate senior political leadership and would force the Senate to act on nominees' appointments instead of being allowed to engage in dilatory tactics that cripple the State Department's functionality for weeks, months, or even years. I'd like anyone to tell me how many times it took a year to appoint somebody to an appointed position. Assert leadership in the appointment process. The next administration should assert leadership over and guidance to the State Department by placing political appointees in positions that do not require Senate confirmation, including senior advisors, principal deputy assistant secretaries, and deputy assistant secretaries. Given the department's size, the next administration should also increase the number of political appointees to manage it. To the extent possible, all non-confirmed senior appointees should be selected by the President-elect's transition team or the new President's Office of Presidential Personnel, depending on the timing of selection, and be in place the first day of the administration. No one in a leadership position on the morning of January 20th should hold that position at the end of the day. Just fire everybody. I love that they're inferring that they always take power from a Democrat, somebody they disagree with. That's why they want everyone fired on the same day. These recommendations do not imply that foreign service and civil service officials should be excluded from key roles. It is hard to imagine a scenario in which they are not immediately relevant to the transition of power. The main suggestion here is that as many political appointees as possible should be in place at the start of a new administration. Support and train political appointees. The Secretary of State should use his or her office and its resources to ensure regular coordination among all political appointees, which should take the form of strategy meetings, trainings, and other events. The Secretary should also take reasonable steps to ensure that the State Department's political appointees are connected to other departments' political appointees, which is critical for cross-agency effectiveness and morale. The Secretary should capitalize on the more experienced political appointees by using them as a foundation for a mentorship program for less experienced political appointees. The interaction of political appointees must be routine and operational rather than incidental or occasional, and it must be treated as a crucial dimension for the next administration's success. Maximize the value of career officials. Career Foreign Service and civil service personnel can and must be leveraged for their expertise and commitment to the President's mission. Indeed, the State Department has thousands of employees with unparalleled linguistic, cultural, policy, and administrative skills, and large numbers of them have been an enormous resource to the Secretaries of State under which they have served. The Secretary must find a way to make clear to career officials that despite prior history and modes of operation, they need not be adversaries of a conservative president, Secretary of State, or the team of political appointees. Except for the fact that you just said you were going to fire them all. Keep them all in line, but fire them all. Reboot ambassadors worldwide. All ambassadors are required to submit letters of resignation at the start of a new administration. Oh, we're back to firing them again. Previous Republican administrations have accepted the resignations of only the political ambassadors and allowed the Foreign Service ambassadors to retain their posts, sometimes for months or years into a new administration. Yeah, because you wouldn't want somebody who's been working with all these nations to build on that relationship. That would be crazy. The next administration must go further. It should both accept the resignations of all political ambassadors and quickly review and reassess all career ambassadors. This review should commence well before the new administration's first day. This review should commence well before the new administration's first day. Ambassadors in countries where U.S. policy or posture would substantially change under the new administration, as well as any who have evinced? I don't know that word at all. I got to look that word up. Evinced. I've never heard this word. Have you? To evince is to reveal the presence of a quality or feeling. Could have just used expressed or shown. I hate when people think they have to use $5 words. It drives me crazy. As well as any who have evinced hostility toward the incoming administration or its agenda, should be recalled immediately. The priority should be to put in place new ambassadors who support the president's agenda among political appointees, foreign service officers, and civil service personnel, with no predetermined percentage among these categories. Political ambassadors with strong personal relationships with the president should be prioritized for key strategic posts such as Australia, Japan, the United Kingdom, the United Nations, and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Righting the ship. Ensuring the State Department is accountable for serving American citizens will require, at a minimum, that the following steps be implemented immediately. Review retroactively. Before inauguration, the President-elect's Department Transition Team should assess every aspect of State Department negotiations and funding commitments. Upon inauguration, the Secretary of State should order an immediate freeze on all efforts to implement unratified treaties and international agreements, allocation of resources, foreign assistance disbursements, domestic and international contracts and payments, hiring and recruiting decisions, etc., pending a political appointee-driven review to ensure that such efforts comport with the new administration's policies. The quality of this review is more important than speed. The posture of the department during the review should be an unwavering desire to prioritize the American people, including a recognition that the federal government must be a diligent steward of taxpayer dollars. Implement repair. The State Department must change its handling of international agreements to restore constitutional governance. Under prior administrations, unnecessary institutional factors in the department caused numerous logistical challenges in negotiating, approving, and implementing treaties and agreements. This is particularly true under the Biden administration. For example, under the Biden administration, the State Department was considered sufficiently unreliable in terms of alignment and effectiveness such that its political leadership invoked its Circular 175 authority to delegate its diplomatic capacity to other agencies such as the Department of Homeland Security. At the time of publication, the State Department is negotiating or seeking to negotiate large-scale, sovereignty-eroding agreements that could come at considerable economic and other costs to the American people. Although such agreements should be evaluated and approved as are treaties, the Biden administration is likely to simply call them agreements. The Biden State Department not only approves but also enforces treaties that have not been ratified by the U.S. Senate. Yeah, wouldn't want a president or his policymakers to do things that aren't approved by the Senate, huh? That's not hypocritical at all. This practice must be thoroughly reviewed and most likely jettisoned. The next president should recalibrate how the State Department handles treaties and agreements, primarily by restoring constitutionality to these processes. He or she should direct the Secretary of State to freeze any ongoing treaty or international agreement negotiations and assess whether those efforts align with the new president's foreign policy direction. The next administration should also direct the Secretary to order an immediate stand down on enforcement of any treaties that have not been ratified by the Senate, and order a thorough review of the degree to which such enforcement has impacted the department's functions, policies, and use resources. The Secretary of State, in cooperation with the Office of the Attorney General and the White House Counsel's Office, should also conduct a review to identify agreements, in quotation marks for some reason, that are really treaty commitments within the ordinary public meaning of the Constitution, and suspend compliance pending presidential transmittal of those agreements to the Senate for advice and consent. The next administration should also move to withdraw from treaties that have been under Senate consideration for 20 years or more, with the understanding that those treaties are unlikely to be ratified. Under circumstances in which ratification of a stale treaty before the Senate still serves national interests, the treaty letter of transmittal and submission should be updated for current circumstances. The Secretary of State must revoke the most outstanding C-175 authorities that have been granted to other agencies during previous administrations, although such revocations should be closely coordinated with the White House for logistical reasons. I will give Donald Trump $500 if he can personally, live in person, diagram that sentence. That was a mess. Coordinate with other agencies. Interagency engagement in this new environment must be similarly adjusted to mirror presidential direction. Indeed, coordination among federal agencies is challenging even in the most well-oiled administrations. Although such coordination is inescapable and sometimes productive, agencies tend to leverage each other's resources in ways that occasionally have off-mission consequences for the agency or agencies within the resources. Ideally, the Secretary of State should work as part of an agile foreign policy team along with the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of Defense, and other agency heads to flesh out and advance the president's foreign policy. Bureaucratic stovepipes of the past should be less important than commitment to and achievement of the president's foreign policy agenda. The State Department's role in these interagency discussions must reflect the president's clear direction and disallow resources and tools to be used in any way that detracts from the presidentially directed mission. Coordinate with Congress. Congress has both the statutory and appropriations authority to impact the State Department's operations and has a strong interest in key aspects of American foreign policy. The department must therefore take particular care in its interaction with Congress, since poor interactions with Congress, regardless of intentions, could trigger congressional pushback or have other negative impacts on the president's agenda. This will require particularly strong leadership of the Department of State's Bureau of Legislative Affairs. The Secretary of State and political leadership should ensure full coordination with the White House regarding congressional engagement on any State Department responsibility. This may lead to, for example, the President authorizing the State Department to engage with members of Congress and relative committees on certain issues, including statutorily designated congressional consultations, but to remain radio silent on volatile or designated issues on which the White House wants to be the primary or only voice. All such authorized department engagements with Congress must be driven and handled by political appointees in conjunction with career officials who have the relevant expertise and are willing to work in concert with the President's political appointees on particularly sensitive matters. Respond vigorously to the Chinese threat. The State Department recently opened the Office of China Coordination, or China House. This office is intended to bring together experts inside and outside the State Department to coordinate U.S. government relations with China and advance our vision for an open, inclusive international system. Whether China House will streamline U.S. government communication, consensus, and action on China policy, given the presence of other agencies with strong competing or adverse interests, remains to be seen. The unit is dependent on adequate and competent staff being assigned by other bureaus within the State Department. Nonetheless, the concept is one a Republican administration should support mutatis mutandis. Again, what is that? What is mutatis mutandis? Do you speak Latin? This person really enjoys using $5 phrases. It means with the necessary changes having been made. You could easily have changed that sentence, Mr. Writer, to nonetheless, the concept is one a Republican administration by supporting the changes being made. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, has been at war, in quotation marks, with the U.S. for decades. Now that this reality has been accepted throughout the government, the State Department must be prepared to lead the U.S. diplomatic effort accordingly. Did you catch that? We're at war just because they say so. The centralization of efforts in one place is critical to this end. Review immigration and domestic security requirements. Arguably, the department's most noteworthy challenge on the global stage has been its handling of immigration and domestic security issues, which are inextricably related. The State Department's apparent posture toward these two issues, which are of paramount importance to the American people, has historically been that they are of lesser importance than other issues and that they can be treated as concessions in broader diplomatic engagements. In other instances in which access to the U.S. in the form of immigrant, permanent, and non-immigrant temporary visas could potentially serve as diplomatic leverage, it is almost never used. To some degree, the State Department and many of its personnel appear to view the U.S. immigration system less as a tool for strengthening the United States, and more as a global welfare program. To ensure the safety, security, and prosperity of all Americans, this must change. Below are several key areas in which the department's formal and informal postures must adjust to reflect the current immigration and domestic security environment. You ready for some racism? I smell racism coming. Visa reciprocity. The United States should strictly enforce the doctrine of reciprocity when issuing visas to all foreign nationals. For too long, the U.S. has provided virtually unfettered access to foreign nationals from countries that do not respond in kind, including countries that are actively hostile to U.S. interests and nationals. Well, yeah, you idiots, that's how visas work for foreign nationals. You want somebody in your country because their country's treating them like crap. Mandatory reciprocity will convey the necessary reality that other countries do not have an unfettered right to U.S. access and must reciprocally offer favorable visa-based access to U.S. nationals. All right, so let me know the next time a member of the U.S. wants to immigrate to Libya. The State Department's reaction time to other countries' changes in visa policies with respect to the U.S. must be streamlined to ensure it can be updated in real time. I'm sorry, that entire paragraph is so short-sighted and anti-human and bigoted. It's unbelievable. Section 243D, Visa Sanctions. Visa sanctions under the Section 243D of the Immigration and Nationality Act, or INA, enacted into law to motivate countries to accept the return of any nationals who have been ordered removed from the U.S., should be quickly and fully enforced. Recalcitrant countries that do not accept receipt of their returned nationals will risk the suspension of issuance of all non-immigrant visas, or all visas. These country-specific sanctions should remain in place until the sanctioned country accepts the return of all its removal-pending nationals and formally commits to future regular acceptance of its nationals. Black-letter implementation of this law will demonstrate a heretofore lacking seriousness to the international community that other nations must respect U.S. immigration laws and work with federal authorities to accept returning nationals or lose access to the United States. Right-sizing refugee admissions. The Biden administration has engineered what is nothing short of a collapse of U.S. border security and interior immigration enforcement. This administration's humanitarian crisis, which is arguably the greatest humanitarian crisis in the modern era, one which has harmed Americans and foreign nationals alike, will take many years and billions of dollars to fully address. One casualty of the Biden administration's behavior will be the current form of the U.S. Refugee Admission Program, or USRAP. The federal government's obligation to shift national security essential screening and vetting resources to the forged border crisis will necessitate an indefinite curtailment of the number of USRAP refugee admissions. The State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, which administers USRAP, must shift its resources to challenges stemming from the current immigration situation until the crisis can be contained and refugee-focused screening and vetting capacity can reasonably be restored. Strengthening bilateral and multilateral immigration-focused agreements. Restoration of both domestic security and the integrity of the U.S. immigration system should start with rapid reactivation of several key initiatives in effect at the conclusion of the Trump administration. Re-implementation of the Remain in Mexico policy, safe third country agreements, and other measures to address the influx of non-Mexican asylum applicants at the United States-Mexico border must be day one priorities. Although the State Department must rein in the C-175 authorities of other agencies, the Department of Homeland Security should retain or regain C-175 authorities for negotiating bilateral and multilateral security agreements. Evaluation of national security vulnerable visa programs. To protect the American people, the State Department, in coordination with the White House and other security-focused agencies, should evaluate several key security-sensitive visa programs that it manages. Key programs include, but should not be limited to, the Diversity Visa Program, the F Student Visa Program, and J Exchange Visitor Visa Program. The State Department's evaluation must ensure that these programs are not only consistent with White House immigration policy, but also align with its national security obligations and resource limitations. Pivoting abroad. Personnel and management adjustments are crucial preludes to refocus the State Department's mission which is implementing the president's foreign policy agenda and, in doing so, ensuring that the interests of American citizens are given priority. That said, the next president must significantly reorient the U.S. government's posture toward friends and adversaries alike, which will include much more honest assessments about who our friends are and who are not. This reorientation could represent the most significant shift in core foreign policy principles and corresponding action since the end of the Cold War. Although not every country or issue area can be discussed in this chapter, below are examples of several areas in which a shift in U.S. foreign policy is not only important, but arguably existential. The point is not to assert that everyone in the evolving conservative movement, or, in some cases, the growing bipartisan consensus, will agree with the details of this assessment. Rather, what is presented below demonstrates the urgency of these issues and provides a general roadmap for analysis. In a world on fire, a handful of nations require heightened attention. Some represent existential threats to the safety and security of the American people. Others threaten to hurt the U.S. economy. And others are wild cards, whose full threat scope is unknown, but nevertheless unsettling. I'm scared. The 5 countries on which the next administration should focus its attention and energy are China, Iran, Venezuela, Russia, and North Korea. And with that cowardly, ill-informed bigotry, I'm going to stop this section. We're on page 211 of this 920-page document. The next section is titled, The People's Republic of China. That should be a hoot. This recording and all other recordings related to this Project 2025 reading are copyrighted by Douglas Wayne Ricketts. All rights reserved. Unless you agree with me that Project 2025 sucks, then please feel free to use as much of this reading as you want. Thanks for listening.